It was a dark and stormy night when Sarah, a nurse at St. Agnes Hospital, received an urgent call to assist with a patient in the ICU. As she hurried through the dimly lit corridors, she couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that seemed to permeate the air. When Sarah reached the ICU, she found the room empty except for the patient lying in bed, hooked up to various monitors and machines. The patient, Mr. Johnson, was an elderly man who had been admitted earlier that day with severe chest pains. As Sarah checked Mr. Johnson's vitals, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her from the shadows. She tried to brush it off, as her imagination running wild, but the sensation persisted. Suddenly, the lights flickered and dimmed, casting the room into darkness. Sarah's heart raced as she fumbled for her flashlight, her hands trembling with fear. Just as she managed to turn it on, she heard a faint whisper echoing through the room. "Help me," the voice pleaded, sending shivers down Sarah's spine. She scanned the room frantically, but there was no one else there besides her and Mr. Johnson. Trembling, Sarah approached Mr. Johnson's bed, only to find him staring back at her with vacant eyes. His mouth opened, but instead of words, a guttural growl escaped his lips, chilling her to the bone. Terrified, Sarah stumbled backward and tripped over a stray medical cart, crashing to the floor. As she lay there, paralyzed with fear, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching from the darkness. With a sinking feeling in her chest, Sarah realized that she was not alone in the room. Whatever had spoken to her was now drawing closer, its presence looming over her like a shadow in the night. Desperate to escape, Sarah scrambled to her feet and bolted for the door, the echoes of her footsteps mingling with the sinister laughter that seemed to follow her every move. As she burst out into the hallway, gasping for breath, Sarah vowed never to set foot in the ICU again. For she knew that whatever haunted St. Agnes Hospital was not of this world, and it hungered for more than just flesh and bone. And so, as the storm raged on outside, Sarah fled into the night, haunted by the memory of the horror that lurked within the hospital's walls. The next day, Sarah couldn't shake off the unsettling events of the previous night. She tried to convince herself that it was just a product of exhaustion and an overactive imagination, but deep down, she knew that what she had experienced was all too real. Determined to find answers, Sarah decided to confide in her colleague, Dr. Ramirez, who had worked at St. Agnes Hospital for many years. As she recounted the events of the previous night, Dr. Ramirez listened intently, his expression growing more somber with each passing moment. When Sarah had finished her tale, Dr. Ramirez sighed heavily and told her about the hospital's dark past. Decades ago, St. Agnes had been the site of unspeakable horrors, rumors of experiments gone awry, and patients disappearing without a trace. Legend had it that the spirits of those who had suffered within the hospital's walls still roamed the corridors, seeking vengeance on the living. Many staff members had reported strange occurrences over the years, lights flickering, disembodied voices, and shadowy figures lurking in the darkness. Sarah listened in horror as Dr. Ramirez recounted these tales, her blood running cold. Could it be that the entity she encountered in the ICU was one of these restless spirits trapped between the realms of the living and the dead? Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah and Dr. Ramirez delved deeper into the hospital's history, scouring old records and interviewing longtime staff members. What they discovered sent chills down their spines. Mr. Johnson, the patient Sarah had attended to, had been admitted to St. Agnes Hospital years ago under mysterious circumstances. According to hospital records, Mr. Johnson had been a patient in the same ICU where Sarah had encountered him, and his death had been shrouded in secrecy. No cause of death had ever been determined, and his body had vanished from the morgue without a trace. As Sarah and Dr. Ramirez pieced together the puzzle, they realized that they were dealing with something far more sinister than they had ever imagined. The entity that had haunted Sarah in the ICU was none other than the vengeful spirit of Mr. Johnson, trapped within the hospital's walls for eternity. Haunted by their discovery, Sarah and Dr. Ramirez vowed to unravel the mysteries of St. Agnes Hospital and put an end to the torment that plagued its halls. But little did they know that the darkness that lurked within those walls was far more powerful than they could have ever imagined, and that their investigation would unleash forces beyond their control. And so, as night fell once again over St. Agnes Hospital, Sarah and Dr. Ramirez prepared to confront the horrors that lay within, knowing that their lives and souls hung in the balance. Dr. Emily Collins had always prided herself on her professionalism and dedication to her patients, but nothing could have prepared her for the horrors that awaited her on that fateful night at Mercy General Hospital. It was the graveyard shift, and the hospital was shrouded in darkness as Emily made her rounds, checking in on her patients in the quiet corridors of the intensive care unit. As she entered room 237, she found Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman with severe respiratory problems, struggling to catch her breath. Emily rushed to Mrs. Thompson's bedside, adjusting her oxygen mask and administering medication to ease her discomfort. But despite her best efforts, Mrs. Thompson's condition continued to deteriorate, her labored breathing echoing through the silent room like a grim reminder of the fragility of life. As the night wore on, Emily couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. It was as if the very walls of the hospital were whispering secrets that she was not meant to hear. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream shattered the stillness of the night, sending Emily running down the hallway towards the source of the sound. She burst into room 215 to find Nurse Jenny cowering in the corner, her eyes wide with terror. "What happened?" Emily demanded, her heart pounding in her chest. Nurse Jenny pointed a trembling finger towards the bed, where Mr. Davis, a patient recovering from surgery, lay motionless, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. He just disappeared," Nurse Jenny stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily's blood ran cold as she approached the bed, searching for any sign of Mr. Davis. But there was nothing, no trace of him remained, as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Determined to unravel the mystery, Emily and Nurse Jenny combed through the hospital's security footage, searching for any clue that might explain Mr. Davis's disappearance. But what they discovered only deepened the mystery. According to the footage, Mr. Davis had never left his room. As panic swept through the hospital, Emily found herself haunted by visions of dark figures lurking in the shadows, their eyes gleaming with malice. She knew that whatever had taken Mr. Davis was not of this world, and it hungered for more than just flesh and blood. Desperate for answers, Emily delved into the hospital's dark history, uncovering a series of unsolved disappearances that stretched back decades. Rumors of a malevolent force that dwelled within the hospital's walls had long haunted the staff, but no one dared to speak of it aloud, fearing the consequences of tempting fate. With each passing day, Emily felt herself being drawn deeper into the darkness that enveloped Mercy General Hospital. She knew that she was risking her own life by confronting the entity that lurked within its walls, but she refused to stand idly by while innocent lives were lost to its insatiable hunger. Armed with nothing but her courage and determination, Emily prepared to confront the horrors that awaited her in the heart of the hospital's labyrinthine corridors. Little did she know that the true horror lay not in the shadows, but in the depths of her own soul, where darkness lurked, waiting to consume her whole. And so, as the night stretched on into eternity, Emily ventured forth into the unknown, her fate intertwined with that of Mercy General Hospital, a place where the line between life and death blurred, and nightmares became reality. As Emily delved deeper into the mysteries of Mercy General Hospital, she found herself grappling with forces beyond her comprehension. The hospital seemed to have a mind of its own, its corridors shifting and twisting like a labyrinth designed to ensnare unwary souls. Haunted by visions of the dark entity that lurked within its walls, Emily sought solace in the words of Dr. Marcus Reed, an elderly psychiatrist who had spent decades studying the supernatural phenomena that plagued the hospital. Dr. Reed warned Emily of the dangers that lay ahead, urging her to tread carefully, lest she become ensnared in the hospital's malevolent grasp. But Emily refused to back down, driven by a fierce determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Armed with Dr. Reed's research and her own unwavering resolve, Emily delved deeper into the hospital's dark history, uncovering a tangled web of lies and deceit that stretched back centuries. She learned of the hospital's origins as an asylum for the mentally ill, where patients were subjected to unspeakable horrors in the name of science. As Emily pieced together the puzzle, she realized that the entity that haunted Mercy General Hospital was not a mere ghost, but something far more sinister, a malevolent force born from the suffering and anguish of those who had perished within its walls. Determined to put an end to the hospital's reign of terror, Emily enlisted the help of a small group of allies, Nurse Jenny, Dr. Reed, and a fearless security guard named Tom. Together, they ventured into the darkest depths of the hospital, armed with nothing but their courage and conviction. But as they journeyed deeper into the bowels of Mercy General Hospital, they soon realized that they were not alone. Shadowy figures lurked in the shadows, their eyes gleaming with malevolence as they watched their every move. With each step they took, the hospital seemed to come alive around them, its walls pulsating with unseen energy as if it were a living, breathing entity hell-bent on their destruction. As they reached the heart of the hospital, they found themselves face to face with the entity that had plagued their nightmares, a swirling vortex of darkness that seemed to consume everything in its path. With a fierce battle cry, Emily and her allies launched themselves into the fray, their weapons clashing against the darkness in a desperate bid to vanquish the evil that threatened to consume them. But as the battle raged on, Emily realized that victory would come at a steep price. Sacrifices would have to be made, and not all of them would emerge unscathed from the darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. And so, as the dust settled and Mercy General Hospital lay in ruins around them, Emily and her allies stood victorious, their spirits bruised but unbroken, for they knew that although the darkness had been vanquished, its echoes would linger on in the hearts and minds of those who had dared to confront it. As they emerged from the ruins of the hospital, battered but unbowed, Emily knew that their battle was far from over. For the true horror lay not in the darkness that lurked within Mercy General Hospital, but in the depths of human nature itself, a darkness that could never truly be extinguished. And so, as they set forth into the unknown, Emily and her allies vowed to remain vigilant, knowing that the forces of evil would always lie in wait, ready to rise again when least expected. Dr. Michael Carter had always prided himself on his rationality and skepticism. As the head of psychiatry at St. Jude's Hospital, he had spent years debunking myths and legends surrounding mental illness, but nothing could have prepared him for the horrors that awaited him within the hospital's walls. It started with a series of strange occurrences that seemed to defy explanation. Patients reported hearing voices in the dead of night, whispering secrets that sent shivers down their spines. Others claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their rooms, their eyes gleaming with malice. At first, Dr. Carter dismissed these reports as the product of overactive imaginations and sleep deprivation. But as the incidents grew more frequent and more disturbing, he knew that something sinister was at play. Determined to uncover the truth, Dr. Carter delved into the hospital's dark history, uncovering a tangled web of secrets and lies that stretched back decades. He learned of St. Jude's origins as a sanatorium for the mentally ill, where patients were subjected to cruel and inhumane treatments in the name of science. As Dr. Carter pieced together the puzzle, he realized that the hospital was harboring a dark secret, a malevolent force that fed on the suffering and anguish of its patients, growing stronger with each passing day. Armed with this knowledge, Dr. Carter embarked on a desperate quest to rid St. Jude's Hospital of the evil that plagued it. But the deeper he delved into the hospital's mysteries, the more he realized that he was fighting a losing battle against an enemy that defied comprehension. As the hospital descended into chaos, Dr. Carter found himself confronting horrors beyond his wildest nightmares. Patients began to disappear without a trace, their bodies never found. Others fell into a catatonic state, their minds shattered by the malevolent force that lurked within the hospital's walls. With each passing day, Dr. Carter felt himself being drawn deeper into the darkness that enveloped St. Jude's Hospital. He knew that he was risking his own sanity by confronting the entity that dwelled within its halls, but he refused to back down, driven by a fierce determination to protect his patients at any cost. But as the darkness closed in around him, Dr. Carter realized that he was fighting a losing battle against an enemy that could not be defeated. For St. Jude's Hospital was not just a place of healing, it was a prison for lost souls, trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. And so, as the hospital fell silent and the darkness claimed him as its own, Dr. Carter knew that his fate was sealed. For in the heart of St. Jude's Hospital, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred, there could be no escape from the horrors that lurked within. As the grip of darkness tightened around St. Jude's Hospital, Dr. Carter found himself facing a dilemma unlike any he had encountered before. With each passing day, the malevolent force that dwelled within the hospital's walls grew stronger, its influence spreading like a cancerous shadow. Desperate to save his patients and himself from the horrors that threatened to consume them, Dr. Carter sought out the help of a renowned occultist named Professor William Blackwood. Despite his initial skepticism, Dr. Carter knew that he had no choice but to turn to the supernatural for answers. Together, Dr. Carter and Professor Blackwood delved into the arcane mysteries that surrounded St. Jude's Hospital, uncovering ancient rituals and forbidden knowledge that had long been buried beneath layers of secrecy and deceit. But as they delved deeper into the darkness that lurked within the hospital's walls, they realized that they were not alone. Shadowy figures watched their every move, their eyes gleaming with malevolence as they sought to thwart their efforts at every turn. With each new revelation, Dr. Carter and Professor Blackwood found themselves confronting horrors beyond their wildest nightmares. They learned of the hospital's sinister past, a history stained with blood and suffering, where the boundaries between the living and the dead had been blurred beyond recognition. But even as they uncovered the truth, they realized that the malevolent force that plagued St. Jude's Hospital was far more powerful than they had ever imagined. It was a primal force of darkness, a remnant of a time long forgotten, and it would stop at nothing to protect its domain. Determined to put an end to the horror that gripped the hospital, Dr. Carter and Professor Blackwood devised a daring plan to confront the entity head-on. Armed with ancient incantations and arcane artifacts, they ventured into the heart of the hospital, where the darkness lay thickest. But as they faced off against the malevolent force that lurked within, they realized that their efforts were in vain. For the entity was not bound by the laws of the mortal world. It was a creature of pure chaos and destruction, a force of nature that could not be tamed or controlled. In the end, Dr. Carter and Professor Blackwood paid the ultimate price for their hubris, their souls consumed by the darkness that lurked within St. Jude's Hospital. As the hospital fell silent once more, its halls haunted by the echoes of their screams, the true horror of its legacy was finally revealed. For in the end, St. Jude's Hospital was not just a place of healing, it was a gateway to hell itself, a prison for lost souls condemned to wander its corridors for all eternity. And so, as the darkness claimed yet another victim, the hospital remained a silent sentinel on the edge of the abyss, its secrets buried beneath layers of dust and decay, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to fall prey to its insatiable hunger.